Greetings. I want to spend a few minutes talking about um, our own biases and why it's important to use different theories in supporting our criminal profiling analysis. Let me start with an example. Let's say that you are going to take my class in the classroom, but you had never met me before, and you ask one of your friends, "Have you ever heard of, Dr. Witten?" And your friend said, "Oh yeah, I took his class. Great class. Young guy, looks like he comes out of a GQ magazine, real tall, dresses in very nice clothes. He brings food for the class. Oh, it's a wonderful class. You should really take it." Okay, well, now you have some expectations. You're expecting a particular professor, you're expecting food. You get to class the first day and you think, what is going on here? My friend must be playing a terrible joke on me, or maybe my friend got confused with another professor. Okay, so your expectations obviously are changed, but you would go into the classroom expecting a different professor than what you got, and also food, which you didn't get. And I use that analogy to kind of get us into the thought process of where we bring our own biases into understanding violent criminal behavior. There's certainly a tendency to have been socialized to believe that certain people are more likely to engage in crime than others, and to also have an affinity or attraction to certain groups or people, and maybe even have negativity or stereotypes of other groups or individuals or in certain scenarios. Some people say, no, I have no biases at all. I'm completely neutral, and I'm not sure if that's accurate. It seems even if you look at some of the social psychological research, they catch biases related to all kinds of factors. But I think it's healthy to try to identify these biases. I give seminars to counselors and law enforcement officers on interviewing perpetrators. One of the things I said is, there's certain perpetrators that you just don't like, that you detest so much that you would have trouble conducting a good interview. And they kind of look at me like, "Whoa, what are you saying? Are you saying it's possible that I may dislike a client or an interviewee so much that it would, contaminate the interview?" And I said, "Yeah, that's what I'm asking. I'm not, saying it's going to happen. I'm just asking." And I think we need to ask these questions in any case, any types of case. Certainly I've worked cases before where there's a perpetrator, and everyone that I talked to said, there's no way that person would commit that type of crime. There's no way. I've known that person for 10 years. That person is a model citizen, and et cetera, et cetera. And so there's biases there that that person would not commit that type of crime. Let me just mention real briefly, I haven't really said anything about my background. My background is basically in mental health counseling, forensic counseling, and sociology. And I have never worked in law enforcement before. I've never been a law enforcement officer. After failing to make it as a musician, I got a job very early on in my career, actually right out of undergrad school, working on a hospital-based sex crimes unit. And I worked on that unit for a while, and then worked in some private practices, forensic mental health centers, and then moved toward research and teaching. For the past 10 years, I've been teaching and researching a lot about genocide, which we'll discuss later. But I have also worked with victims and perpetrators in the sex crimes field as well, and also in domestic violence cases and other types of violent-related cases. And another thing I'd like to mention, of course, is that you almost have to say beware. And I should have probably mentioned this in the first video, but that I think one needs to mentally prepare themselves for a course like this, because you're going to see read about some very disturbing cases, and there's still some interesting questions that are unanswered, but we do have some data about how courses and information and working in the field can affect us. For example, there's a wealth of information out on secondary traumatic stress, or traumatic stress that people who work in these types of fields experience from interviewing and seeing all these violent, horrific cases day in and day out. And that's something that you'll have to deal with if you are working in the field, or if you're going to get into the field. That a lot of times people say, oh, so what you do at the office today, or what you see, and you may not want to talk about it, you not want to tell them, you may minimize it, and sometimes there's just horrific cases that you will think about, and that you may find very disturbing. And I have a couple of videos out from another class on secondary traumatic stress that you might want to review at some point as well. And or also known as vicarious trauma. It's kind of like post-traumatic stress disorder, but the person didn't experience the direct stressor. Instead, they kind of picked up on that post-traumatic stress from hearing about or working in a case that involved horrific situation or scenarios. So it's very important to know that, I think, before getting into the field, or if you're in the field, to understand about it as well. Certainly, I know, for example, if I'm at Starbucks with my laptop computer and I'm doing some research, I can tell you, even if I don't think anyone can see, I will never, look at any graphic photos. I won't look at autopsy photos or anything like that when I'm in a public place, because I want anyone to see that. And so I think that is something to consider. Even when you're carrying around your book, people see the cover of it. This is the book we're using this semester for the summer 2012, Holmes and Holmes Profiling Violent Crimes. People start talking to you about that. Here's another good resource too. I used to be able to lift this thing, but there we go. The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, DSM-4TR, published in 2000 by the American Psychiatric Association. Here's the short version for your glove compartment, briefcase, purse, or back pocket. Don't get the metal spine if you're going to carry it in your back pocket. Get the one without. Very useful, but I wanted to mention that these are both available. That this is available online now fully at the American Psychiatric Association website, because they are working on revisions, and the DSM-5 is due out 2013. So we're actually going through this whole process now of trying to figure out what to include or exclude and what changes to be in. I shouldn't say we. I have nothing to do with these changes. But the nice thing is that they have the DSM-4TR, the current one in use, and then the proposed one for 2013 kind of side by side online, so you can compare and contrast, and also you can get this thing free online. Whether you agree or disagree with psychiatric evaluation, categories and techniques, one thing I will give the American Psychiatric Association credit for, and that is putting all this research and these items and this material online so we can review it, talk about it, use it, discuss it, critique it. So that's very helpful as well. Briefly, I want you to start thinking about theories. And when we get into Chapter 4 on criminal theories and psychological profiling, we're actually going to be talking about some general theories and some specific ones, but I want you to start thinking about now, and then as we go through all this, what are your assumptions about why people engage in violent criminal behavior? Not only your assumptions, but your beliefs, your expectations. And where did those come from? And how willing are you to subject those to challenges by looking at alternative theories that you may find in the materials? So it's a fascinating area, and I think that by looking at these different theories, we can even add additional very helpful tools to profiling specific violent criminal cases. Now, I'll tell you real briefly, just to kind of wrap up, is that when I first started teaching this course around 10 years ago or so, everything seemed to come together, everything fit well. And then I started studying genocide, and a lot of the theoretical assumptions I had related to criminal profiling, especially serial murder, fell apart. And for the last 10 years, I've been working in the area of genocide research. That's really my specialty area. And I've been trying to develop and borrow from other disciplines and other researchers and teachers theories to explain genocide. I'm not satisfied with the current theories that we have in criminal justice, and so I'm working on bringing some theories together. And also, I have found that my research on genocide has challenged a lot of my assumptions that I've had about sexual homicides, rape, about child sexual abuse, and about serial murder and homicide in general. And so I kind of see this, at least for myself, as a paradigm shift. Thomas Kuhn, the great philosopher, talked about paradigm shifts in science, and that's kind of what I have been experiencing myself, is that my old models just didn't work to explain genocide. And so now I have to come up with new models and look for new models. And sometimes you'll see that in the history of criminal profiling, and that kind of gives us some assistance in trying to figure out where we're going as well. Finally, I'll just mention, for example, interestingly enough, when I was in undergrad school and in grad school, we never talked about internet crimes. And you might wonder why. Some of you astute observers know exactly why, and that is because the internet had not been invented at that point in time. And so we certainly need to address high-tech crimes as related to cyber stalking and bullying and the like, and we'll try to integrate those into some of the sections as well. And this wraps up this video.